We're walking together. All right, so taking a deep breath. Yes, so just allowing all that has occurred so far just to settle into our being. Yes. All right. That was for me. Technology, you know how that goes. So, this month we are exploring the power of vulnerability. And we started the journey by getting clarity and defining really what vulnerability is, what it isn't, and why it is important. So make sure to go back and listen to the last couple weeks' talks for that message. And then last week we looked at how, what gets in our way of actually being vulnerable, and fear being the main thing there. We talked about how we can take steps to move through our fear by remembering our wholeness and letting love lead the way. So this week we're going to look at how to let go and let in. All that is seeking to be revealed and transformed both in our individual lives and collectively. Embracing vulnerability through this lens, we will begin to see how vulnerability is the key ingredient for creating both healthy relationships and a thriving society that works for all. So the first step on this journey is to cultivate self-awareness. We must embrace the practice of self-inquiry, self-reflection, and curiosity to discover what's really going on beyond the surface of our words and our actions. This past week in the spiritual practices and principles class that I'm leading, we had a very insightful discussion around what actually motivates our behaviors and actions. And what we discovered together was that underneath those kind of habitual behaviors, patterns that we have, such as perfectionism, procrastination, inconsistency, those things that we say hold us back from actually manifesting our heart's desires. What we discovered was that the deeper work actually lies in understanding why we even do those behaviors. So although perfectionism may seem like the simple desire to be seen as good or perfect, what is even driving that need is a core belief, often in not good enough or unworthiness, or perhaps it is a call for love. Because along the way in the journey of our lives, we have come perhaps to believe that we have to earn love, or that being perfect or good will get us the love that we all desire. Anyone relate? Mm-hmm. So in order to awaken from this habitual thought behavior pattern, to awaken from those subconscious core beliefs that are often running the show in our lives, we must practice compassionate curiosity. To be willing to look at what is actually motivating our actions and our behaviors, and to heal the root cause. And then what we may discover is, after doing that deep healing and transformational work, that those behaviors won't even be there, because there's no longer a need that's not being met, that those behaviors we're trying to compensate for. And this isn't always the case, right? This is an example, but we know that everyone's brain works differently. Some of those behaviors and things may take different tools, accountability, various things. But I want us to be compassionately curious to see, when we identify the things that we think are actually stopping us from getting what we want, what are those behaviors actually telling us? what is really seeking to be known, to be transformed, so that those behaviors no longer have to work in place of actually knowing our worth and asking for what we need and desire directly. And this is, it's deep work, y'all, but the truth is that we are all beloved. We are one. We are an extension of life energy itself, getting to know itself uniquely as it only can as us. So truly letting go means that we remember the truth of who we are, and all that other stuff is for us to release. To let go of the judgments and the thoughts and the ideas of what we should or shouldn't do. To let go of the expectations of the outside world, the expectations from our loved ones, from society, from the media, and to let go of the attachment to the outcome. Let go of controlling circumstances or our environment in order to get it just right, in order to be seen or known as perfect. These are the things that we let go of. Anything other than the very essence and truth of who we are. And then we can live from that place of wholeness and allow love to lead the way. Letting go, shedding layers, dropping the masks, and rediscovering the truth of who we are. To live authentically and be willing to be vulnerable, not only with others in our lives, but vulnerable with ourselves. Sometimes we may be so good at masking or tricking the world into believing that we are some idealized version of ourselves that we actually start to believe that that is who we are. This kind of performative version, that the masked version. Mm-hmm. But the downside of living that way is eventually we will burn out. It's exhausting because it takes an energy that's not authentic. When we are vulnerable, we can drop into that power and that source and check in with what is really seeking to emerge and allow it to come through organically, naturally, authentically, instead of trying to be who we think we should be. Now imagine what your life would be like if you didn't have the fear of judgment from yourself or anyone else. Be compassionately curious with yourself. Get real with yourself. Are there behaviors that you practice that may feel natural to you, but with a little deeper inquiry, perhaps you notice they are not actually an authentic expression of yourself? This kind of work takes a willingness to really be vulnerable with ourselves. And the more that we can begin to look at and see and make friends with all parts of ourselves, the more then we can begin to explore these aspects of ourselves in a more expansive and authentic way. And here's the thing. The more we're able to do this for ourselves, the greater our ability will be to then create the space for others to do the same, which then allows us to truly work towards creating a world that works for everyone. And yet the world is showing us right now exactly what happens when we live in a society built on systems that are incongruent with our true nature. Mm-hmm. When systems built on the opposite of humanity and vulnerability, when systems that operate instead on defensiveness, self-preservation at all cost, this kind of all about me and not we mentality, there becomes an impact on the wholeness of our society. When we live in a framework where success is gained by the oppression of others, or built on the backs of people seen as machines instead of humans, there is a cost. When we are taught to dehumanize the enemy, there is a cost. When there is a lack of compassion in our economic and educational systems, there is a cost. When vulnerability is devalued in the corporate world, there is a cost. And the cost is the exact thing we say that we honor and desire most: our freedom, love, and life itself. So I invite you now to use the creative power of our imagination and join me in this exploration. Imagine now that we live in a world where all people, including young boys and men, are allowed to be vulnerable. We live in a world that acknowledges and honors the full range of emotions, that honors the struggle, and where the struggle is not seen as weakness or an innate failure, but imagine that instead we honor and we value the wholeness of life, the wholeness of what we may refer to in kind of binary terms of the masculine and feminine energy, where there is a balance and a wholeness. Imagine a world where phrases like "man up," or "I'll give you something to cry about," or "you run like a girl," where these phrases are things of the past. Imagine when there is no need to do all the things and be all the things in order to try to keep up with the unrealistic expectations of the consumerist and capitalistic society. Imagine a world where it would be what it would be like. Because it is only through our imagining and our visioning of this new world that it can become a reality. So imagine a world that works for everyone. What would it look like? What would it feel like? What would it be like? And my hope is that when the values of love and humanity and kindness and oneness supersede the value of money and commodity, that there will then be no more wealth gap. There will be equality in all systems and truly equal opportunity for all. My hope is that when vulnerability is embraced by all, not only individually, but collectively, in our education system, in our economic system, in our work culture, that there will no longer be so much pent up rage and hurt and pain and the struggle that can lead to such horrific acts of violence and domestic terrorism that are becoming way too prevalent in the United States, especially. So this week, that very thing hit very close to home, yes? When a young man walked into the Old National Bank in downtown Louisville. So I want to take a moment, and we're going to put the names on the screen now, and just take a moment of silence, honoring those who lost their lives to this violence. And if you choose to, say their names with me. Tommy Elliott, Joshua Barick, Juliana Farmer, James Tutt, Deanna Eckert. And, I've been hearing and seeing and reading so much about, why and when is enough enough? What more needs to happen until we finally wake up? And when will our elected leaders make a change? But the question that I've been asking myself this week, that I feel really gets to the root, perhaps, is what is the cost of living in a world that affords so much power and privilege to some bodies over others? And are we willing to create a new way? And this led me to contemplate then the negative effects of the patriarchy. And not just for women, as I'm very aware of that, as it is my lived experience, but what are the consequences? What is the cost of patriarchy as well for men? I'm curious what these, the rise of this violence, of these mass shootings are pointing to in our collective consciousness and in our society. What is the hidden cost beneath the behavior of these young men? And what is really seeking to be healed and revealed on a collective level? And I want to acknowledge, I'm speaking from the more binary gender terms, because that is what this patriarchal system is based on, and that's the context in which I am speaking of today. But I do acknowledge that gender is a spectrum beyond just men and women. But in this context, let's first get clear on what is meant by the patriarchy. It is a system that prioritizes men and masculine values while devaluing and oppressing women and feminine values. It is deeply ingrained in many cultures around the world, including here in the United States. So I'm not saying anything about men specifically. I'm talking about the system, the waters that we swim in of the patriarchy, and its effect on all people. The system that reinforces the harmful stereotypes and the prejudices towards women and other marginalized groups, creating misogyny and objectification of women, which can again lead to violence. The system that reinforces harmful stereotypes and bases towards other marginalized groups as well, such as people of color, the LGBTQ community, people with disabilities. This can lead, as we see, to discrimination and violence and the exclusion of opportunities and resources. But really, the system has a negative effect on everyone, even those that it, appears to lift up and say, you have the power, you have the privilege, but at what cost? In the system, men are forced to adhere to rigid gender roles that can be very damaging to both mental health and emotional well-being. Because this very narrow definition of masculinity that values strength and dominance and power over, as well as emotional detachment, this system devalues vulnerability and empathy and compassion, and can leave men feeling isolated and disconnected to others if they have not done their own work to see the system and rise above. So because this, hypermasculinity and this feeling of isolation is not inherent to our humanity, it is not the natural way of being, then it has a cost. We are inherently emotional beings. We know that we are interconnected with all of life and therefore empathetic and compassionate. But the patriarchy society teaches us that there is only certain ways to be that are right and others that are wrong based on gender. I was in the store the other day, and this little girl was there with her grandmother, and she picks up this baseball bat, a little kind of plastic t-ball. She was about 4 years old. And she's like, oh, I want one of these. And the grandmother quickly snaps back, those are for boys. And this precious little 4-year-old in her most, stern, courageous voice says, why? I like to play golf too. And everyone would laugh because obviously it's baseball bat, not a golf bat. But, the point is that in that moment, the grandmother was trying to impose a societal belief onto this young child's natural desire to want to play, to want something. And you can see how at that young age, with less social conditioning, there was the immediate pushback of like, why? I want to play too. We want to play too, right? There is something within us that is that natural desire to express itself. And when we are told for some arbitrary reason that we can't, this innate truth of who we are without any conditioning will rise up and say, I want to play, I want to connect. And it is that very need for connection, our basic human desire, that when left unattended, under-nurtured, can lead to behaviors such as revenge, and rage, and violence. Trying to feel something, anything. This emotionally immature world that we live in that devalues emotional vulnerability and compassion and empathy comes at a deep cost. And the patriarchy society further cultivates then this perfect storm for violence by creating a culture of silence and shame around issues such as mental health and emotional expression, sexuality, creativity. Any ways of being bold and big and free in the world challenges that system where people are supposed to stay in their place and play their roles. So therefore it leads to a repression of this energy, but it still has to find an outlet and will come out sideways. We see this in our own relationships, right? We're really like experiencing some shame or something deep, but yet then we yell at the person that cuts us off or our spouse for not switching the laundry. It comes out sideways. We see it in our own life, and then we see it in these bigger ways in the world. Unless we consciously choose to learn another way. And I'm not claiming to know the answer to such a massive issue in our culture, but I do believe that the shift must come from a spiritual perspective. It must come from a spiritual awakening first, that then results in such changes as our political landscape and our systems in the world. Because trying to just solve the problem at the level of a problem, as we know, does not work. It is temporary unless we do not heal the root of what is motivating our actions as a collective as well. In order to experience a healing on both the personal and the collective level, we must wake up to the awareness that we are one. To embrace the spiritual principle of oneness, recognizing the interconnectedness of all things in the universe. And at its core, oneness is the understanding that everything in existence is fundamentally connected and inseparable. It is the recognition that we are all part of the same divine energy that permeates the universe, and that every person, every creature, every being, every object, everything is an expression of this energy. And this isn't just some abstract idea or some philosophical concept. It is a living reality that we experience in our daily lives. So when we begin to wake up and see and recognize the oneness of all things, we begin to see the world in a new way, which invites more compassion and empathy. And we begin to then act in ways that honor and respect the interconnectedness of all life, living in integrity with our values of kindness and love and joy and peace and freedom. Only then can we begin to demonstrate this world that we envision, and a world that works for all. So we do this work on the individual level, but for the benefit of the collective.
Mm-hmm.
Because if people really knew and moved through the world knowing that we are one, move through the world letting love lead the way with kindness and joy and respect for others, then the behavior of violence would not even exist, because it would not be stemming from unresolved stuff, right? We would realize that what we do unto others, we do unto ourselves. So if we love ourselves deeply, we could not even imagine such a thing. So this is where when you hear and see these things in the world and go, like, what can I do? Well, some may be called to take action, protest, march, get involved in politics. Some may be moved to care for those, to give blood. And underneath all of that action, nothing will change until we all are moved to know the truth of who we are and see that in each and every being, knowing that we are one. So the invitation this week is to practice compassionate curiosity and self-awareness, to see what is really motivating each of us in our actions, what is motivating our words that we say, what is motivating these behaviors in our lives. And it takes a willingness to really look and pay attention to those things that may be habitual, to deconstruct, why did I really say that? What am I really wanting in this moment? To acknowledge the true desire of our heart, that is to be seen and loved and heard and appreciated and honored, whatever it may be for you. Ask, what is the deep desire of my heart? And to remember that the truth is you are all that you desire. You have everything you need within to demonstrate that desire, because you are backed by the entire power of the universe. The same God stuff, this cosmic isness that lives in the stars and the ocean and the mountains and the rivers, lives in you. We are one. And as Dr. Ernest Holmes reminds us, there is a quiet, inner, persistent confidence, a non-resistant but complete acceptance, an inner flowing with the stream of life, knowing that it carries me safely and surely to my destination and to the accomplishment of every good purpose. So in short, there's something within you that is the very essence, nature, and truth of your being. And when we allow that presence and love to lead the way, all will be well. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Let's take it in prayer. Again, taking a nice deep breath. Knowing and recognizing right here, right now, there is one life, one love, one energy, one essence, one presence. That which some call God, Spirit, Life, Universe. That is freedom, that is peace, that is wholeness. This one life that is love itself, moving in as and through each and every being. Knowing that love is right here, right now. Expressing in as and through me, in as and through all life. For there is only one presence, one power, one energy, one source, back of all things, having its way right here, right now, as me, as you, as all. So it is from this place of oneness that I speak this word now, affirming and knowing that transformation is happening now, that healing is happening now, that we are all waking up to see and to know that we are one. That peace and love and kindness, wholeness lead the way. For we allow this truth to move through every cell of our being, our physical body, our emotional body, our spiritual body, our mental body. Be open to the fullness of life itself, to be expressed without limits, without barriers. This full flow of life, moving through all, seeing each person as the beloved, honoring and respecting life, honoring and respecting our innate heart's desires. Walking through this world as love, seeing love, being love, knowing love, sharing love. So I'm so grateful to know that a healing is happening now. I'm so grateful to know that the next evolution of consciousness is occurring right here, right now, as we all in this room take responsibility and say yes. Everyone that is hearing the sound of my voice says yes to allow this new world to be birthed through us as wholeness, as love, as peace. It is happening now. So grateful, so grateful to live in this world guided by love. And with that, I release this word into the action of the law that always says, yes, 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 my beloved, it is done, and it is so. And together we say,
And so it is.